which has seen complete...
A particular area. Yes, there'll be lots and lots of jobs, but if you're just a flake that floats across a whole lot of areas, you'll get to a certain level and you won't go much further. So anyone will be able to get a job, but to make a real difference and be more influential, you're going to need a really solid technical base in something. Put a lot of work into working out where you fit, how you interact with others and how others see you. And in your careers, you should assume that you'll change job many times, that you'll probably change careers several times, and you should allow for taking time out to regroup, refresh your training and so on. Be completely opportunistic about cultivating mentors and patrons and exemplars. Networking's not just a business school slogan. It's the way the world operates. In times of increasingly in times of staff shortages, putting a job in the paper is not enough. You ring people, you ring around, and you scavenge your networks. So be opportunistic, but don't forget to have a life. So we're in the challenge of our age. You guys are key players. We need to retool the Australian economy, and you guys are going to be developing the skills to do it. You'll have rich and diverse opportunities, and try and develop some long-term compass settings and go for it. Now that's a very good question. Sandy could probably answer that at least as well as I, but in part because we haven't developed sufficient governance mechanisms for securing the water to use for the environment, and also because the last 5 years has been the time of most active policy development in this area, and it's been the time of the worst drought we've had since white people have been keeping records. And so that's been a very, very difficult time during which to try and develop new management regimes for environmental flows, because there just hasn't been any water in the system to use in that way. Nevertheless, we've still got a bit of work to do to work out. There are several options for how the environment might, say, participate in the water market. You could just have the government come in and buy the water in the market. But many economists argue that once that starts to happen, that will artificially drive up the price of water, because people know the government's in the market, they'll just bid the price up knowing at the end of the day that the government's just going to buy it anyway. But then that has bad impacts for everyone else. You could set up an environmental water management as an independent body and charge that body with participating in the market at arm's length from the government. And some would argue that's the role the Murray-Darling Basin's Commission's been playing for a long time anyway. Or you could take water for the environment off the top of the amount and only allow trading to occur for water over and above what the environment needs. So there are a whole range of different options, but it's all been a tad academic in the last 5 years because there hasn't been enough rain to worry about it down in the southern basin.
Question over back. Thank you, Andrew. The new Parliament House is the seat of government, it's the seat of great power in this nation. But how do you see the landscape of the new Parliament House in terms of the issues you've raised today?
It's a bit too early to tell. Certainly the initial smoke signals on climate have been good. I've had some contact with the offices of Minister Wong, Garrett and Burke, the Agriculture Minister, and it's fair to say that all those ministers' offices have only been fully staffed in the last couple of weeks. So it's too early yet. They're still coming to grips with the job of being in government and coming to grips with the enormous volume of paper that goes through a minister's office, and they're having to do that in a time of preparing for a May budget, which is going to be a tough one. So the degree of new policy development and sort of new conceptual thinking and so on that's taken place to date has been pretty modest. But that's exactly what I would expect for this stage after a big change of government.
I was actually thinking as well in terms of the physical environment.
Physical environment.
Instead of the building itself.
Yeah. Well, personally, I like the building, and I don't have a problem with that. I particularly love the sort of symbolism of the people used to be able to walk over the top of the Parliament. So the thing that pissed me off more than anything else was the stupid security measures that got imposed on that building. I personally would prefer it if the lawns were thinner rather than Danthonian and pile rather than a green thing, and if the native grasses went right up and over the top of the Parliament. But actually, I think it's a wonderful piece of architecture, and I quite like the building.
Question you agree?
Recently, there's been frequent discussions in the media about desalination.
Yeah.
My question is, what is the thinking behind desalination rather than just subsidising water tanks for homes?
Yeah. Well, the thing about desal is that it adds water to the system. If you it doesn't add water to the system if you count all the water that's in the sea, but terrestrially, it's actually putting more water in the system, and it's a guaranteed supply. If you run a desal plant that produces X megalitres per day, you know that you're going to get X megalitres per day, independent of the climate. So that's the attraction of it. From an engineering point of view, this is fantastic. We can crank up this plant, and the water's going to come out of the end of the pipe, regardless of what the drought conditions are, regardless of climate change. We will know we'll at least have X megs to sell or to put into the market. That said, and I think there's a reasonable case for Perth, because Perth had a situation not only of dramatically declining inflows, but dramatic overuse of its groundwater aquifer and a huge climate change problem. So I think that one is possibly justified. My personal view is that a desal plant for Sydney or Melbourne or any other of our new coastal capitals is that is the ultimate addition of defeat and failure. There is more than enough water in Sydney, more than enough water in Brisbane, more than enough water in Melbourne to never need a desal plant if you had proper stormwater reuse, if you had proper water-sensitive urban design, if you had proper pricing of water. Perth is not blameless. The water's been way too cheap in Perth for way too long. They have been the slowest to impose reasonable water pricing arrangements. They still haven't, for just sheer lack of political will. But nevertheless, they've got the most acute shortage issue of all the big capitals. We don't need desal anywhere else. And as carbon prices go up, desal becomes even more and more expensive. And it's basically bottled electricity. It makes sense if you had, say, solar-powered desal. At a small scale, makes sense for places like Ceduna, Karratha, wind, places in very arid parts of the continent that are on the coast that are a hell of a long way from anywhere else. Having a small desal barge offshore that's solar powered makes some sort of sense for a few hundred people. But it doesn't make sense to try and do it at a scale for big cities that have already got plenty of water. And yes, you can do a lot more with water-sensitive urban design, with rainwater tanks, with a whole bunch of things.
Speaking about building
Speak up, Steve.
Oh, sorry. Speaking about the building regulations and stuff like that, what kind of changes do you think needs to be implemented, and why do you think they haven't been put in yet?
The question was about building regulations. I think the building industry and the market is incredibly